In the land of our ancestors, there stood a village called Irumole. It was a place where the great silk cotton tree stretched its ancient arms toward heaven, and where the elders said the spirits still whispered their secrets to those who knew how to listen. But when our story began, heaven had stopped crying. The rains had not come for 7 moons. The earth was cracked and thirsty. The wells had dried up, and every drop of water was more precious than gold. In this dying village lived a woman named Adamma. Her name meant, daughter of beauty, but her true beauty was not in her face. It was in her heart. While others in the village grew bitter and selfish, Adamma remained kind. But kindness in hard times can be dangerous. And Adamma was about to learn just how dangerous it could be. Adamma woke before the sun each morning to walk 2 hours to the distant stream. This was the only place where water still flowed, and it was getting weaker every day. She carried her water calabash on her head, walking carefully so that not a single drop would spill. At home, her husband Obinna waited with their 3 children. He was a good man, but the drought had made him hard. Water is life, he would tell her every day. Do not waste a drop on strangers. Our family comes first. Adamma nodded, but in her heart, she struggled. She had been raised by a grandmother who taught her that kindness was the greatest treasure a person could own. A heart that gives will never be empty, her grandmother used to say. But a heart that keeps everything for itself will never be full. The other women in the village had started to change. They hid their water from their neighbors. They locked their doors when strangers came by. They whispered that generosity was foolishness in times like these. But Adamma was different. And that difference was about to be tested in a way she never imagined. It was on a day when the sun beat down like a hammer on iron that Adamma first saw him. She was returning from the stream with her precious water when she noticed a figure sitting under the silk cotton tree. The man was old and bent. His clothes were torn and dusty. His lips were cracked, and his eyes were clouded with exhaustion. In his trembling hand, he held an empty gourd. Water, he whispered when he saw Adamma approach. Please, daughter, just a sip. Adamma stopped. She looked at her calabash, full of the water she had walked 4 hours to collect. She thought of her husband's warning. She thought of her thirsty children at home. But then she looked at the stranger's face, and she saw something in his eyes that she could not ignore. She saw desperation. She saw hope. She saw a fellow human being who needed help. Wait here, grandfather, she said gently. Let me help you. What Adamma did next would change everything. But was it wisdom or foolishness? That remains to be seen. Adamma knelt beside the stranger and began to pour water into his empty gourd. But as she poured, she realized that a sip would not be enough. The man was dying of thirst. So she kept pouring. 1 cup. 2 cups. 3 cups. Enough, daughter, the stranger said. You have given me life. Keep the rest for your family. But Adamma looked at the small amount left in her calabash, and then at the man's grateful eyes. Something in her heart told her to keep giving. She poured out the rest of her water into his gourd. Every drop. Until her calabash was completely empty. The stranger drank deeply. As he did, Adamma noticed something strange. The man seemed to grow stronger with each sip. His bent back straightened. His clouded eyes became clear. Thank you, daughter, he said, his voice now strong and clear. You have given me more than water. You have given me your trust. He stood up, no longer appearing old and weak. Tell me, what is your name? I am Adamma, she replied, suddenly feeling uncertain. What is yours, grandfather? The stranger smiled, and when he did, Adamma could have sworn she saw lightning flash in his eyes. My name is Nzinga, he said. And you, daughter, have just passed a test you did not know you were taking. As Adamma walked home with her empty calabash, she met her neighbor Chizoba at the village well. Chizoba was a woman who measured everything by what it could bring her. Adamma. Chizoba called out, her voice sharp with curiosity. Why is your water pot empty? Did you spill it on the way home? Adamma hesitated. She knew Chizoba would not understand. I gave it to a thirsty traveler, she said quietly. Chizoba's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with contempt. You did what? Have you lost your mind? Your own children are thirsty, and you give water to some beggar. He was dying, Adamma tried to explain. And what about your family? Will they not die too? Chizoba's voice grew louder, attracting the attention of other villagers. This is what happens when kindness becomes stupidity. Soon a small crowd had gathered. They looked at Adamma with a mixture of pity and anger. She gave away all her water, Chizoba announced to everyone. All of it. To a stranger. The villagers shook their heads. Some muttered under their breath about foolish women who could not think properly. Others looked at Adamma with disappointment. But what they did not know was that their mockery was about to be answered in a way none of them expected. When Adamma reached home, her husband Obinna was waiting by the door. One look at her empty calabash told him everything he needed to know. Where is the water? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I gave it to a man who was dying of thirst, Adamma said, her voice barely above a whisper. Obinna's face darkened like a storm cloud. You did what? He was old and sick. He would have died if I had not helped him. And what about us? Obinna's voice rose. What about our children? Do we not matter to you? Their 3 children gathered around, sensing the tension. Little Kemi, the youngest, began to cry. You walk 4 hours in the hot sun to get water, Obinna continued, and you pour it out for some beggar. Have you forgotten that we are your family? Adamma felt tears stinging her eyes. I have not forgotten. But I could not watch him die. Then you are a fool, Obinna said coldly. Tonight, our children will go to bed thirsty because their mother cares more about strangers than her own blood. Adamma went to bed that night with a heavy heart. Had she made a terrible mistake? Had her kindness hurt the people she loved most? But the answer was coming sooner than she thought. That night, as the village slept, strange things began to happen in Irumole. First, the silk cotton tree began to rustle. But there was no wind. Not even a breeze. Yet the great tree swayed and whispered as if invisible hands were moving its branches. Then came the drums. Deep, rhythmic beating that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The sound rolled across the village like thunder, but the sky was clear. One by one, the villagers woke up. They came out of their huts and looked around in wonder and fear. The drumming grew louder, and the tree swayed more violently. What is happening? They whispered to each other. Elder Ebel, the oldest and wisest person in Irumole, stood in the center of the village. Her ancient eyes were bright with understanding. The spirits are stirring, she announced. Something important is about to happen. Someone in our village has pleased the ancestors. The villagers looked at each other with questions in their eyes. Who among them had done something to wake the spirits? But they would not have to wait long for their answer. As dawn broke over the village, the drumming stopped. The silk cotton tree became still. But the air remained filled with expectation, as if the whole world was holding its breath. That is when Nzinga appeared. He walked into the village center as the morning sun painted the sky gold. But he was no longer the bent, ragged traveler of the day before. His back was straight. His clothes were white as clouds. His eyes held the wisdom of ages. Behind him walked 12 other figures, all dressed in white, all carrying symbols of power and prosperity. The villagers gathered around, their mouths open in amazement. Even the children stopped playing and stared. People of Irumole, Nzinga called out, his voice carrying clearly across the village. Yesterday, I walked among you as a thirsty traveler. I knocked on doors and asked for water. Most of you turned me away. The villagers shifted uncomfortably. They remembered the ragged beggar, and they remembered closing their doors. But one person, Nzinga continued, gave me not just a sip, but everything she had. She gave me her family's water, knowing that her own children would go thirsty. All eyes turned to look for Adamma. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart pounding with fear and confusion. What was happening? Who was this man really? I am Nzinga, the stranger announced, messenger of the Great Spirit, guardian of the rains, keeper of abundance. I travel the world testing the hearts of people. I appear as a beggar to see who will show kindness when it costs them everything. The villagers gasped. Some fell to their knees. Others stepped back in fear. Nzinga's eyes found Adamma in the crowd. Daughter, come forward. Adamma's legs felt like water, but she walked toward him. The crowd parted to let her pass. She could feel every eye in the village watching her. You gave water to a stranger when water was more precious than gold, Nzinga said. You fed the hungry when you had little food. You showed mercy when others showed only selfishness. He reached into a bag carried by one of his companions and pulled out a crown made of gold and precious stones. But more beautiful than the gold were the symbols carved into it, symbols of rain, harvest, and prosperity. The spirits have chosen you, Adamma, to be the new keeper of abundance for your village. You will decide how the blessings of heaven are shared among your people. The villagers stood in stunned silence. Adamma, the woman they had called foolish, was being crowned by a messenger of the spirits. But what did this mean for the village? What did this mean for her? Nzinga lifted the crown high above his head. As he did, the silk cotton tree began to glow with a soft, golden light. The air filled with the sweet scent of rain, even though no clouds were in the sky. By the power of the ancestors, Nzinga declared, by the wisdom of the elders, by the will of the Great Spirit, I crown you, Adamma, as the keeper of abundance for the village of Irumole. He placed the crown on her head, and as he did, something miraculous happened. The dried-up wells throughout the village began to bubble with fresh, clean water. The withered crops in the fields turned green. The air grew cool and sweet. The villagers cried out in joy and amazement. Children ran to the wells and laughed as they splashed in the fresh water. Adults fell to their knees in gratitude. But Nzinga was not finished. Listen well, people of Irumole, he said, his voice carrying the authority of thunder. Your new keeper will lead you in the ways of generosity and kindness. Under her guidance, your village will prosper. But remember this, abundance shared is abundance multiplied. Abundance hoarded is abundance lost. He looked directly at Chizoba, who had been standing with her mouth open in shock. Those who mocked kindness will learn its value. Those who hoard will learn to share. This is the way of the spirits. As the ceremony ended, Nzinga and his companions began to fade away like morning mist. But before he disappeared completely, he spoke one last time to Adamma. Your real test begins now, daughter. You have the power to bring rain or drought, harvest or famine. Use this power wisely. Remember that a leader who serves her people is greater than a queen who rules them. Then he was gone, leaving only the scent of rain and the memory of his words. Adamma stood in the center of the village, wearing the crown of abundance, surrounded by people who had mocked her just hours before. She felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Elder Ebel stepped forward and bowed deeply. My queen, she said, tell us what you need from us. The other villagers followed her example, bowing to the woman they had called foolish. Even Chizoba knelt, her face red with shame. But Adamma did something that surprised everyone. She took off the crown and held it in her hands. I am not your queen, she said firmly. I am your sister. This crown is not for ruling. It is for serving. We will work together to make our village prosperous, and we will share everything equally. The villagers looked at each other in amazement. Most people who gained power wanted to use it over others. But Adamma wanted to use it for others. In the days that followed, Adamma began to organize the village in a new way. The water from the wells was shared fairly among all families. The abundant crops were harvested together and distributed according to need. She established rules that would ensure no one ever went hungry or thirsty again. But more importantly, she taught the villagers to help each other. When your neighbor is in trouble, she told them, you are in trouble too. When your neighbor prospers, you prosper too. We rise together or we fall together. Chizoba, who had been the most selfish person in the village, was the hardest to change. She still grumbled about sharing and complained about helping others. One day, Adamma approached her. Sister Chizoba, I have a special task for you. Chizoba looked suspicious. What kind of task? I want you to be in charge of welcoming strangers to our village. When travelers come, you will offer them food, water, and shelter. Chizoba's eyes widened in horror. Why me? I do not like strangers. Adamma smiled gently. That is exactly why it should be you. The spirits want us to learn kindness, not just practice it when it is easy. Reluctantly, Chizoba agreed. And slowly, as she was forced to help others, her heart began to change. 3 months after Adamma received the crown, the village faced its first real test. A group of refugees arrived from a neighboring area that had been struck by war. There were 50 of them, men, women, and children who had lost everything. Some villagers were worried. We have enough for ourselves, they whispered, but can we feed 50 more people? Others were more direct in their complaints. They are not from our village. Why should we help them? Chizoba, surprisingly, was the first to speak up. Have you forgotten what we learned? She said firmly. Kindness shared is kindness multiplied. These people need our help. Adamma felt proud of her former enemy. The transformation was working. She called a village meeting. My brothers and sisters, she said, when I was crowned, I promised to serve our people. But who are our people? Only those born in Irumole? Or all human beings who need help? She looked around at the faces watching her. I say that anyone who is hungry is our family. Anyone who is homeless is our responsibility. Anyone who needs help deserves our kindness. The villagers voted to welcome the refugees and share their abundance. And something wonderful happened. As they shared their food and homes, their supplies did not decrease. Instead, they seemed to multiply. This was the magic of the crown. When used for generosity, it created more than it gave away. One evening, as Adamma sat under the silk cotton tree, Elder Ebel joined her. The old woman's eyes twinkled with wisdom. You have done well, child, she said. But I see worry in your eyes. What troubles you? Adamma sighed. Sometimes I wonder if I am worthy of this responsibility. What if I make mistakes? What if I fail the people who depend on me? Elder Ebel laughed softly. Do you think the spirits chose you because you are perfect? They chose you because you have a good heart. A perfect person would not understand the struggles of imperfect people. She pointed to the crown, which Adamma had placed on the ground beside her. That crown does not make you powerful, child. Your kindness makes you powerful. The crown simply shows others what was always inside you. But what if my kindness is not enough? Adamma asked. Kindness is like a seed, Elder Ebel replied. Plant it in good soil, water it with love, and it will grow into something greater than you can imagine. But remember, kindness is the only seed that never dies, even in the hardest ground. These words would stay with Adamma for the rest of her life. They would guide her through difficult decisions and remind her of what truly mattered. As the seasons passed, even Obinna, Adamma's husband, had to admit that his wife's generosity had brought blessings to their family. Their children were healthy and happy. Their home was prosperous. And more importantly, they were respected and loved throughout the village. But the greatest change was in Chizoba. The woman who had once mocked kindness had become its greatest champion. She personally welcomed every stranger who came to the village. She organized food distributions for the poor. She taught children about the importance of sharing. One day, Chizoba came to Adamma with tears in her eyes. "Sister," she said, "I owe you an apology. When you gave water to that stranger, I called you foolish. I said kindness would not fill your stomach. But I was wrong. Kindness has filled our whole village with joy." Adamma embraced her former rival. "We all learn at different speeds, sister. What matters is that you learned." "I have been thinking," Chizoba continued. "That day when you gave away your water, you knew your children would be thirsty. But you gave it anyway. How did you find such courage?" Adamma thought for a moment. "I did not think about courage," she said finally. "I only thought about what my grandmother taught me, that we are all connected. When one person suffers, we all suffer. When one person is blessed, we all share the blessing." Years passed, and the village of Irumole became famous throughout the land as a place of kindness and prosperity. Travelers would come from far away just to see how people could live together in such harmony. Adamma grew old, but she never stopped wearing the crown of abundance. And she never stopped teaching the lesson she had learned from Nzinga. Kindness, she would tell the children who gathered around her, is not about being nice when it is easy. True kindness is about doing the right thing even when it costs you something important. Elder Ebel, now very old, would nod in agreement. "Remember, children, kindness is the only seed that never dies. Plant it wherever you go, and you will leave the world more beautiful than you found it." When Adamma's time finally came to join the ancestors, the whole village mourned. But they did not forget her lessons. The crown of abundance was passed to another worthy person, and the tradition of generosity continued. Today, if you travel to that part of Africa, you can still find the village of Irumole. The silk cotton tree still stands, and the people still tell stories of Adamma, the woman who gave water to a thirsty stranger and was crowned by destiny. The lesson of her life echoes through the generations: true wealth is not what you keep for yourself, but what you share with others. True power is not about ruling people, but about serving them. And true greatness comes not from taking, but from giving. If this story has touched your heart, remember to subscribe to hear more wisdom from our ancestors. Share this tale with someone who needs to remember the power of kindness. And most importantly, look for opportunities in your own life to give water to a thirsty traveler. Because you never know, that stranger you help today might be destiny in disguise.